Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
Very good evening to you. This is Newsline Live, running a little bit late due to technical difficulties. Our apologies. My guest this evening is Dr. Rohantha Athukorala, who's spent a lifetime serving with multinationals. He's also served in several positions heading state-owned enterprises. I won't ask him why they're all making losses, because I know that he turned them around to a certain point. Now then, very good evening to you, Dr. Athukorala, and welcome to the program. Sorry about the delay. But where on earth is the economy headed? Interest rates are going up. The government is the biggest borrower with 9,000 billion rupees. A 10% increase in interest rates means they've got to find another 900 billion, all right? And the private sector, they borrow 6,000 million. If you take 10%, that's 600 billion there. And all of this, of course, is passed on to that very special person known as the consumer. So what do we have to do to turn this economy around? And after all, our biggest issue still was and still is the availability of dollars.
Faraz, thank you very much for the invite, and I know it's tough. It's a tough situation, and you're asking tough questions for which actually I don't have answers.
But who does?
But I just want to share something with you. When I was heading the Economic Council, we were in the same situation in 2009, and we had just 11 days of money that was available, and there was this gent, Ijaz Ghani from the World Bank, who was leaving Asia and going to the African region. And I asked him, what's going to happen to Sri Lanka? And he said, nothing is going to happen. And then I said, I know we are young, we don't have the experience that you have, but you need to give me some insight. We are not stupid also. And he said, he took a piece of paper and he showed from 1960 until 2010, at every moment when Sri Lanka was challenged, a solution emerged which an economist cannot give. And true to his word, not even 8 days after that, the whole commodity bubble burst. Oil, which was $150, came down to $28. 2015,
with all due respect, I don't mean to interrupt you, but all this is just wishful thinking. It happened then, it may not happen now, it may happen now. Apart from wishful thinking, what's the how serious is corruption, for example? Is eradicating of corruption enough to pay the monthly salary bill of the public service workers and the pensions? That amounts to 80 billion rupees every month.
Faraz, you're right. Yes, we have challenges. We have $50 million in our coffers, and it's actually 1 day of import. We had $150 when we started this month, and you're bringing out another question with regard to corruption. And, how do we manage that?
Well, I mean, the JVP, they made a big show and dance and everything else of various corruption. None of this is new. We've all known about this. Certainly on this network, we've covered at least more than half of those stories, if not all, at some point, right, in some way. This is all, these are all optics. Even the JVP are down to playing optics. They may be having a good PR manager now. I don't know. But it's ridiculous that, they're just parading some files. They haven't even told us what the total is. If they told us the total, we can then work out whether it's at least 80 billion, because we need 80 billion every month to pay the public service salaries and pensions.
See, for us, there are things that we can control, there are things we cannot control. In my view, I think the best thing that has happened to this country, because every time somebody takes office, the first thing that happens is a whole heap of corruption to earn back the money that one has spent on election. So at least now there is no money to earn. So somebody who takes office will start having to do their work properly. They'll have to do that. We have held public office and we know for 3 months you do good and then you're under severe pressure to sign all the bills, which we don't do, and we quit and go. So I think that is what has happened good here. And the second, I think, to my mind, let's focus on what we can control. Like, for instance, if you take the tea industry, I mean, I've served the tea industry, tea board for almost 10 years. Our production has come down by about 30%. We are getting fantastic prices.
Is that because of this blessed organic
absolutely
fertilizer nonsense?
So
absolute nonsense.
Absolutely. So now what do we do? Again, there's no point talking on what we could not control. It's a wrong decision. I mean, and now the question is, how do we get that inorganic fertilizer back on track, at least now, so that you will have one cycle of proper fertilization that happens, so that then we can get back our tea industry on track. Right now, we are getting good prices, about 1,000 rupees per kilogram. I mean, at least let us focus on that. Now, the government has asked for a $3 billion dollar loan from Japan, and apparently it's kind of positive. At least if that money could be brought in and invested in the correct short-term ventures that one can actually invest and get some return, we can get the dollars into this country. Secondly, I think there's no point in us discussing economic strategy if at least now there is no proper focus coming from the political ideology. I mean, it's just a ping-pong game that is happening right now. If you don't get this bad image going across the country, if you don't stop it even now, we will not be able to have the tourists that were supposed to come even last time. At least if we can get 100,000 plus tourists coming in, which we had actually in the month of March, and this time it has dropped to 50,000, the chances are that we lose that money also coming in. So I'm looking at real micro at the ground end what we can do. Look at tea industry, look at the tourism industry, and see how we can bring the money in, and see whether how we could use that money in terms of our expenditure. So there are things I can control, there are things we cannot control. So I'm just focusing, and I think we should focus on the things that we should control.
And what can we control? How are we going to get more dollars in?
We got to drive. I mean, first of all, is that I'm not sure if we have the correct team that has gone to IMF. I would like to see a little bit more strong economists coming on board.
Should we cut to the chase? Are you saying that our finance minister isn't up to the mark?
No, I mean, he's giving the correct vibes, but also...
So what's wrong? What in the composition, what's wrong?
I would like to have a strong economist on the core team, not on the advisory committee, but to have it on the core team of discussions. And there are some good floating people around. The likes of the Nicholas, who is in the Rotterdam University. I mean, get the guys on, because they have the kind of acumen that can support the advisory team which is there, so that then we get this strategy in terms of economy on board. Because right now nobody is talking about economic strategy. Everybody is talking about the short term. So I think we need to have that conversation being brought into the fore. None of the media reports it. It's never discussed in Parliament. So unless we get that in place, I don't see anyone looking at us for any dollar income.
Now then, Rohantha, honestly, if you were advising or if you were on an advisory panel to the Ministry of Finance or to the President, for example, what would you say? Look, obviously, this is not going to go away in a day or two, but what must we do? Which parts of the 48 key economic indicators should we be addressing? Is it farming? Is it the tea industry? What is it? Which one? Or which few?
Look at the quick wins for us. I would put my money on tourism, because, as soon as you start bringing some degree of normalcy into the market, you'll have the guys coming on board.
Where is the tourists going to come when they see Sri Lanka? Literally every town has got a protest. And, whilst the people, the foreigners, our friends who come here and want to create memorable memories for themselves, whilst they are also a tolerant lot and whilst we are a resilient lot, no right-thinking tourist is going to really want to come here when we are in an absolute mess.
Well,
Generators don't run because they have generators, but they don't have diesel. You know, those days we had diesel, but we couldn't afford the generators, or we didn't think of buying them. So what's the point? I mean, where are we headed?
see, what do you do? We
Change
have-
the government?
Well,
There are tens of thousands of young fellows and not so young people asking for a change of government.
it's not going forward. I mean, you know what happened today in Parliament. I mean, that's the reality. I know we had wishful thinking, but then if the reality is what that's coming out, and we don't have the power of controlling, I mean, we need to start asking ourselves whether there could be some kind of a win-win situation that can be achieved to stop the current unrest. If that unrest is not addressed today, if it is not addressed tomorrow morning, again we'll be having this discussion tomorrow night.
But the point is, these people are not asking for anything fancy. They're asking for the absolute basic essentials. They want fuel. They need diesel. They need kerosene. They need cooking gas. You know, somebody called me today and said, "Oh, you need to take LAFGAS to task because they're not supplying any gas." Well, really? They don't have they don't have the dollars. Sri Lanka doesn't have the dollars to allow them to open an LC.
For us, I would like to see the chambers, I think, being a little bit more vocal and putting pressure because...
Is that you being polite? Because you know these chambers, they just sat there doing almost nothing. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. They're archaic in their thinking. They don't think out of the box. And what are they doing? For example, when it was that surcharge tax, it is they who should have gone to the Supreme Court for a consultation, not each individual company. Why do we have them?
Yeah. So I agree with what you're saying, and I think the time has come when the business community will have to put pressure on the government now to arrive at amicable solution. And if that does not come on board, we'll be discussing the same thing tomorrow, because unrest happens. As you said, the tourists are not going to come, and our production has dropped down on tea. We're going to have issues on the rubber sector again, and then of course the money that's going to come from remittances. So we are in a tough situation. I mean,
and we have a wit amongst our wonderful viewers, because somebody's pointing out that it's obviously the foreign exchange shortage, because it has also apparently affected the audio quality. Maybe our technical department couldn't import the spare parts. I'm saying it almost as a joke, but perhaps that's true. Look, everybody's suffering. If big companies are unable to bring in the raw materials, they're going to have to start laying off staff. And those staff will then join the poverty cycle, which means the government will be left with the baby to look after.
for us, it's not only that. Look at the SME sector. If they can't buy the raw material, they cannot pay the loans. And if the interest rates are gone up to the extent which they can't even cope up their monthly lease payments, then what do you do? So you're right. We are in a challenging situation. So the answer to your questions, I think the time has come when the big boys with the chambers have to put pressure, otherwise they need to come up and say we are closing down.
Yeah.
And it has come.
Somebody's asking, and it's a very potent question. When we're so dependent on imports, for sustenance in terms of fuel, gas, medicine, and so on, why do you think that they floated the rupee at the time?
So
is that poor timing, good timing, bad timing? Is there no such thing as good timing?
well, the inside story is that they say that even the Monetary Board was not aware of the exact day when it was going to be floated, and that's what came from the COPE discussions, and no action has been taken. I mean, we all know that when a dollar is to be floated, you have to do some kind of sequencing. Those are fundamentals, and very likely what you said. I mean, this is economic terrorism, and people need to be held responsible for such decisions. And now in Malaysia, the people were arrested. Now the
Absolutely.
question is that, we have not taken those kinds of key decisions, and we are right now straddled. There is no economic policy. We have an issue with regard to how we're going to survive tomorrow.
Well, the IMF are not going to look kindly at us when we are having political instability.
For us, I mean, it's good that organizations like you are at least bringing this to the forum, and there is going to be open discussion.
Well, to us it's simple because we are the people's channel.
Yeah, but then the question is that I think a time has come when there should be more pressure that comes from the business community, and if that does not come, I mean, even if you look at, for instance, Golface, how many private sector organizations, how many CEOs have actually come on board? I mean, we had, I think, 2 or 3 who came on board. So now time has come when you have to put pressure, and this is not for politics. This is only for the survival of your organization, and you can pay your staff this month. So the question is that somebody has to come on board now. I mean, I could have always stayed away from coming to this interview,
Yes,
because I don't have answers to the questions you give. But then the question is that somebody needs to come on board and put pressure. And the only pressure that I am saying is arrive at a solution. This is not going forward because there is no discussion on economic strategy. I have not heard economic strategy for the last 3 months.
What about the liquidity situation of our local banks then?
They are challenged right now, for sure, and they are stretched. So, I mean, I think the Bankers Association will also have to start now, being vocal. And this is nothing to do with any political ideology, but it's about saying, how do I survive? So the answer to your question is very simple. We have to stop relying on these youngsters who are giving leadership out there, and the mature people with muscle must come on board and start saying, guys, this is enough.
Yeah.
So here what happens is that the people with muscle are sponsoring and helping people and giving them biscuits and milk and putting them in the front, which is not correct.
But this is reflective of Sri Lanka's entire political system. Every election is marked for the bath packet, the quarter bottle of arak or whatever it is, and the cap, the T-shirt, the transport. So this is the pay. That's the bribe, and payback time is when they get elected and they're sat in Parliament.
But fortunately for us, currently it's not for those the guys are in front. I mean, for once they're saying don't mess with the younger generation. So they have come on board, but now I think the people with muscle needs to put pressure, because you're severely challenged tomorrow.
When we were at Golface, I'm sure you noticed it too, there was this placard saying that you messed with the wrong generation. That's become quite an iconic kind of board now. But I was thinking about them, the person holding that board and the youth of our country, when today, the JVP, or yesterday, they bought files and put files on a table. This generation don't want files, they want it online. I just thought I'd make that point.
Yeah, sure. I mean, how many messages we got all on social media, and everybody said was that, yes, we have seen this information for the last 10 years, but the question is, has any action been taken? Has anyone ever been put behind bars?
Indeed.
So the private sector, I think the answer to your question, very simple. The private sector will have to come on board now and get into the discussion and maybe lobby for a decision, and it's only then that economic discussion can take place. Otherwise, it's just going to be it's only a talk show. And
the chambers need to pull their socks up and get a bit more proactive.
But I again repeat for us that, I mean, it may sound kind of childish, but I think the fact of the matter is that Sri Lanka will pull through this, and it has pulled through. From what Ijaz Ghani said is so true. So we got to find a way out.
Thank you. Rohantha Athukorala, thank you very much for being on Newsline Live. And sorry about the delay, technical problems. Now time for the primetime news at 9 o'clock. And I leave you, as always, by wishing you all, God bless you all.